The Gospel of Matthew. The Olivet Discourse 1. Matthew 24, 1-28, Introduction. 1. A challenging passage in the Bible is Jesus' Discourse on the Mount of Olives. A. Given shortly after he left the temple with his disciples. B. Recorded in Matthew 24, 1-51, Mark 13, 1-37, Luke 21, 5-36. C. Commonly referred to as the Olivet Discourse. Our focus will be primarily on Matthew's account. Matthew 24, 1-51, 2. Its difficulty is apparent as one considers the diversity of interpretations offered. A. Some maintain that it is entirely about events preceding the Lord's second coming. B. Others say that it is entirely about events related to the destruction of Jerusalem which occurred in 70 AD. C. Yet many believe it contains reference to both of these events. 3. Even those who say it refers to both events differ as to when a particular event is being described in Matthew's account. A. Some say that verses 4-28 refer to the destruction of Jerusalem, and verse 29 begins the discussion about the Lord's second coming. J.W. McGarvey, The Fourfold Gospel. B. Others contend that verse 35 begins talking about the second coming. C. Others say Jesus switches back and forth throughout the discourse. 4. I have trouble with Matthew 24 describing both events in the light of Luke 17. A. Where Jesus is talking about one of the days of the Son of Man. Luke 17:22-37. 1. Note, he alludes to the fact there is more than one day of the Son of Man. 2. The Lord will come in judgment in ways prior to his final coming at the last day. B. In the discourse of Luke 17, Jesus uses language similar to Matthew 24, but in ways that do not allow for a simple division of Matthew 24, either at verse 29 or 35. Notice. 1. Luke 17:26-29 is parallel to Matthew 24:37-39 found after verses 29 and 35. 2. Yet Luke 17:31 is parallel to Matthew 24:17-18 found before verses 29 and 35. 3. And then Luke 17:34-36 is parallel to Matthew 24:40-41 found after verses 29 and 35. If Jesus is describing just one event in Luke 17, which I believe he is, then he is likely describing just one event in Matthew 24. Jesus went out from the temple and was going on his way. His disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "Don't you see all of these things? Most assuredly I tell you, there will not be left here one stone on another that will not be thrown down." As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? What is the sign of your coming, and of the end of the age?" Jesus answered them, "Be careful that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will lead many astray." Matthew 24, 1-5. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you aren't troubled, for all this must happen, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines, plagues, and earthquakes in various places. But all these things are the beginning of birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to oppression, and will kill you. You will be hated by all of the nations for my name's sake. Then many will stumble, and will deliver up one another, and will hate one another. Matthew 24, 6-10. Many false prophets will arise, and will lead many astray. Because iniquity will be multiplied, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end, the same will be saved. This gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world for a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come. When, therefore, you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Matthew 24:11 and 15. Then let those who are in Judah flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take out things that are in his house. Let him who is in the field not return back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are with child and to nursing mothers in those days. Pray that your flight will not be in the winter, nor on the Sabbath. Matthew 24:16-20. For then there will be great oppression, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, nor ever will be. Unless those days had been shortened, no flesh would have been saved. But for the sake of the chosen ones, those days will be shortened. Then if any man tells you, Behold, here is the Christ, or there, don't believe it. For there will arise false Christs, and false prophets, and they will show great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the chosen ones. Behold, I have told you beforehand. Matthew 24:21-25. If therefore they tell you, Behold, he is in the wilderness, don't go out. Behold, he is in the inner chambers, don't believe it. For as the lightning comes forth from the east, and is seen even to the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For wherever the carcass is, there will the vultures be gathered together. Matthew 24:26-28. 1. The setting of the Olivet Discourse. A. The words of Jesus in the temple. 1. His parables depicting Israel's rejection of him and its consequence. A. The parable of the two sons. Matthew 21:28-32, verses 31-32. B. The parable of the wicked vine dressers. Matthew 21:33-46, verses 42-45. C. The parable of the wedding feast. Matthew 22:1-14, verses 7-9. 2. His condemnation of the scribes and Pharisees. A. Who would fill up the measure of their father's guilt. Matthew 23:29-32. B. Who kill, crucify, scourge, and persecute the prophets, wise men, and scribes he would send to them. Matthew 23:33-34. C. Upon whom the blood of all the righteous would come, upon that very generation. Matthew 23:35-36. 3. His lamentation over Jerusalem. A. The city who kills the prophets and stones those sent to her. Matthew 23:37a. B. The city unwilling to accept the love shown her. Matthew 23:37b. C. Whose house would be left desolate. Matthew 23:38-39. B. The prophecy of Jesus about the temple. 1. After his disciples were showing him the buildings of temple. Matthew 24:1. 2. Declaring that not one stone would be left upon another. Matthew 24:2. C. The questions of the disciples. 1. In Mark's Gospel, 2 questions are asked. Mark 13:4. A. When will these things be? B. What will be the sign when all these things will be fulfilled? 2. In Luke's Gospel, the 2 questions are similar. Luke 21:7. A. When will these things be? B. What sign will there be when these things are about to take place? 3. In Matthew's Gospel, the second question is worded differently. Matthew 24:3. A. When will these things be? B. What will be the sign of your coming, and of the end of the age? 4. Observations regarding these questions. A. Matthew wrote his Gospel for a Jewish audience. 1. He likely recorded the questions as asked by the disciples, who presumed the destruction of temple would mean his coming and the end of the age. 2. Jewish readers of the Gospel would likely have the same conception. B. Mark and Luke wrote their Gospels to Gentiles. 1. To avoid possible misunderstanding by non-Jewish readers, they worded the disciples' questions to reflect what the discourse is actually about. 2. The destruction of the temple and the sign when its destruction would be imminent. 2. The Olivet Discourse. A. What will not be the sign? 1. Be careful that none deceive you, claiming to be the Christ. Matthew 24, 4-5. 2. Don't be troubled by wars, earthquakes, famines, pestilence. Matthew 24, 6-8. A. Such things will come, but the end destruction of the temple is not yet. B. They are only the beginning of sorrows, not the sign of the end. 3. Anticipate persecution and hard times. Matthew 24, 9-13. A. You will be killed and hated for his name's sake. B. Many will be offended, betray one another, and hate one another. C. False prophets will deceive many. D. The love of many will grow cold because of lawlessness. E. But he who endures to the end will be saved. The end refers here 1. Not to the second coming, implying one must live until Christ comes again. 2. Nor to the destruction of Jerusalem, implying once one has survived that event, one's salvation is secured. 3. But to the end of one's life. Revelation 2:10. 4. The gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world. Matthew 24:14. A. As a witness to all the nations. B. Then the end, the destruction of the temple will come. 1. This would end the Jewish sacrifices and other remnants of Old Testament worship. 2. That which was nailed to the cross, abolished by Jesus' death, would pass away. Colossians 2:14-17. Ephesians 2:14-16. Hebrews 8:13. Was the gospel preached to all nations prior to the destruction of the temple? Note what Paul wrote prior to 70 AD. Romans 10:16-18. Colossians 1:23. B. What will be the sign? 1. The abomination of desolation. Matthew 24:15. Mark 13:14. A. Standing in the holy place, the holy city Jerusalem. B. As foretold by Daniel. Daniel 9:26-27. 2. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies. Luke 21:20. A. Luke therefore explains the abomination of desolation. B. In 70 AD, Roman armies surrounded and besieged Jerusalem prior to destroying it and the temple. Thus Jesus answers the disciples' question, what sign will there be when these things are about to take place? C. What to do when you see the sign? 1. Those in Judah are to flee to the mountains. Matthew 24:16-22. A. Don't delay by going to your homes and getting your clothes. B. It will be a difficult time for pregnant and nursing mothers. C. Pray that your flight be not in winter when travel is difficult or on the Sabbath when city gates are closed to travel. D. For there will be great tribulation, though shortened for the elect's sake. 1. Luke specifies the nature of this tribulation. Luke 21:23b-24. 2. A Jewish general taken captive by the Romans just prior to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 offered this summary. A. All the calamities which had befallen any nation from the beginning of the world were but small in comparison with those of the Jews. B. In the siege of Jerusalem, no fewer than 1,100,000 perished. It was during the time of the Passover, when more than 3 million Jews were assembled. C. In surrounding provinces 250,000 were slain. D. 97,000 were taken captive, some killed by beasts in Roman theatres, some sent to work in Egypt, others sold as slaves. Flavius Josephus, Jewish Wars as quoted in Barnes' commentary on Matthew. 3. The elect were Christians, spared by a shortened siege. A. The Jews in the city engaged the Romans in battle. B. Titus, the Roman general, being called to return to Rome, proceeded to end the siege and stormed the city. Barnes' commentary. 2. Don't be misled by false Christs and false prophets. Matthew 24:23-28. A. Even those who show great signs and wonders to deceive. B. For the coming judgment of the Son of Man will be like lightning across the sky. 1. Do not expect to find him in the desert or in inner rooms. 2. When he comes in judgment, it will be swift. Luke 17:22-24. C. Where the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered. 1. Alluding to Jerusalem surrounded by armies. 2. This is the sign to warn them it is time to flee Jerusalem and Judah. Conclusion Part 1. 1. So far, all this depicts a local, escapable judgment. A. Where Jesus warned those in Judah of what is to come. B. Where they are given a sign to let them know when to flee. Indeed, many believe that up to verse 29 or 35, Jesus is foretelling the destruction of Jerusalem and its temple that did occur in 70 AD. 2. It certainly does not fit a worldwide, inescapable judgment. A. As will characterize the second coming of Christ. B. As Paul and Peter taught Christians throughout the Mediterranean world. 1 Thessalonians 5:2-3, 2 Thessalonians 1:7-10, 2 Peter 3:10-12. 3. Our next study will continue the Olivet Discourse, starting with verse 29. A. Which certainly sounds like the second coming of Christ. B. But is it? Or was Jesus still describing events pertaining to the destruction of Jerusalem? Eusebius 300 AD in his Ecclesiastical History wrote that Christians heeded the warnings of Jesus in Matthew 24, and fled Jerusalem when it was surrounded by the Roman army. May we likewise heed the words of Jesus and not be misled by false prophets and false Christs, not be troubled by wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes, or even persecution, but endure to the end by remaining faithful to him, and look forward to his final coming at the last day. The end. The Gospel of Matthew. The Olivet Discourse 1. Matthew 24:1-28.